Sit down now. The flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin like a whip. Passengers flinched, startled by the sharpness in her tone. At the center of it all were three children, Eli, Mia, and Jordan, who froze in the aisle, clutching their neatly folded boarding passes. Their eyes widened, confusion mixing with fear. They weren't running wild. They weren't causing chaos. They were just hungry, excited kids waiting for the first-class meal promised with their seats. But to this attendant, they weren't passengers. They were a nuisance. "I don't have time for your little games," she hissed, her eyes narrowing as if the very sight of them tested her patience. First class isn't a playground. A ripple moved through the cabin, heads turned, whispers flickered in hushed tones. Some passengers frowned, others shifted uncomfortably. Yet no one stepped in. The weight of silence pressed heavily, and the triplets shrank under the glare, their excitement replaced by shame they didn't understand. From just a few feet away, their mother watched. Amara Johnson. Calm on the outside, but inside a storm raged. She sat still, her back straight, hands tightening around the leather armrests until her knuckles paled. She had spent her life building empires, negotiating billion-dollar deals, and standing unshaken in rooms full of men who wanted her to fail. But this was personal. This was her children. And no mother alive, least of all her, would ever tolerate this. The triplets weren't ordinary children. They were miracles, each one. Years earlier, doctors had whispered the word that nearly broke her: infertility. Amara remembered the cold clinics, the endless treatments, the cycle of hope and devastation. She remembered the nights when she lay awake, praying for the chance to become a mother. Science, faith, and sheer determination had brought her here, threefold. And with those blessings came challenges. Jordan, the youngest by 2 minutes, had been born with a delicate digestive condition. Specialized meals, carefully timed every 2 hours, were not luxuries. They were necessities. Amara had arranged everything with the airline days in advance. Doctor's notes, dietary specifications, confirmation from customer service. It was supposed to be seamless, safe, respectful. Yet here was this uniformed attendant, tearing down all of it with a glare. Eli gripped his twin sister's hand tightly. "We didn't do anything," he whispered, his voice trembling. Mia's lips wobbled, but she tried to be brave, squaring her little shoulders. Jordan pressed his palm to his stomach, the hunger pangs already gnawing. Passengers stole glances at Amara now, wondering if she would rise, if she would defend them. Some pitied her. Others looked away, too uncomfortable to intervene. The crew member, emboldened by the silence, leaned closer, lowering her voice so only the children could hear. "People pay real money to be here. Don't think you can just take advantage." That was the breaking point. Amara stood, slowly, gracefully. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone shifted the energy of the cabin. Conversations died. Even the hum of the plane seemed to dull under the weight of her silence. The attendant straightened, suddenly aware that she had miscalculated. Amara's eyes, dark, steady, unforgiving, locked onto her. "No one," she said softly yet firmly enough to carry through the rails, "speaks to my children that way." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. The passengers knew it. The triplets felt it. And the attendant, for the first time, faltered. What she didn't yet know was this. She had not just scolded children. She had awakened a mother whose battles had carved her into steel, whose children were the very reason she breathed. And no airline policy, no badge, no attitude would stand unchallenged against that. The stage was set. A confrontation was coming. And by the end of this flight, no one would forget the name Amara Johnson. The cabin fell into uneasy silence after Amara's words. But inside her, old memories began to stir. Every mother's instinct is fierce, but hers was forged in fire. Years of longing, endless battles with hope and heartbreak before she ever heard her children's first cries. She could still remember the sterile white walls of the fertility clinic, the muffled hum of machines, the sympathetic voices of doctors who told her, again and again, that becoming a mother was unlikely. Each failed treatment chipped away at her spirit. Each negative test felt like a cruel verdict. Friends and colleagues had children easily. Their lives seemed to blossom while hers stood still. But Amara was not the type to surrender. She had built her empire by refusing to accept the word impossible. Why should motherhood be any different? She invested everything, time, energy, resources, into treatments, therapies, experimental procedures. It cost her dearly, not just in wealth but in spirit. Nights alone in her penthouse, curled up on the couch with silent tears. She wondered if her dream would ever come true. Then came the miracle. Not one child, not two, but three. When the doctor confirmed the pregnancy, Amara laughed and cried at the same time. The world blurred, her knees nearly gave way, and she clung to the arm of the chair as though she had been given the universe itself. Triplets, against every odd, against every doctor's warning, against every statistic. 3 lives had chosen her. The pregnancy was brutal. Complications threatened her every week. Doctors recommended bed rest, constant monitoring, a team of specialists. At one point, they suggested she consider reducing the risks by ending one life to save the others. Amara's answer had been ice cold. Don't you dare ask me to choose between my children. She fought for all 3, and she won. The day Eli, Mia, and Jordan entered the world, the hospital room filled with a symphony of cries. Amara, exhausted and trembling, held them one by one, her heart bursting. Eli's wide, curious eyes. Mia's soft, steady grip around her finger. Jordan, so small and fragile, struggling but fighting from the very first breath. Jordan's medical condition revealed itself quickly. His body couldn't digest food like other children. Specialized diets, precisely timed meals, supplements, and constant monitoring became their normal. Amara adjusted her entire life. Business meetings were scheduled around Jordan's feeding schedule. Vacations included a suitcase full of carefully prepared meals and medical supplies. Nannies and staff were trained meticulously. She could command a boardroom of executives with one call, but when it came to Jordan, it was her hands that measured, prepared, and delivered what he needed most. There had been close calls, moments where a delayed meal left him weak and in pain. Amara still remembered the panic of rushing to an ER at 2 a.m., clutching him to her chest, praying she wouldn't lose him. Those memories carved scars deeper than any corporate battle ever could. And yet she never once resented it. Her children were her crown, her greatest success. Every smile, every laugh, every whispered, "I love you, Mommy," was worth the sleepless nights, the medical bills, the sacrifices. That was why this flight mattered. She had planned every detail to protect them. Special requests confirmed, dietary needs documented, everything ensured, so that Jordan could fly safely, without fear, without hunger. And now, in the sterile cabin, thousands of feet in the air, a uniformed attendant had dared to rip all that apart, to treat her children like burdens, to glare at them as though they didn't belong. Amara's jaw tightened. She could hear Eli's shaky breathing, Mia's attempts to be brave, Jordan's stomach growling softly. Rage burned in her chest, but it was contained, precise, the way she handled hostile takeovers. She knew when to strike. She knew when to wait. Her eyes flicked to the attendant, who now avoided her gaze, fussing with her notepad as if nothing had happened. Passengers still whispered. Some disapproved, some looked away, some offered sympathetic glances to the children. No one spoke up. That was fine. They didn't need to. Amara leaned slightly toward her children, her voice low but steady. Don't worry, babies. Mommy's here. And no one will ever take what's yours. It wasn't just reassurance. It was a promise. And the woman in the uniform had no idea just how dangerous a promise from Amara Johnson could be. The hum of the engines filled the silence, but beneath it, tension coiled tight like a spring. The triplets sat stiffly in their wide seats, their small bodies swallowed by the luxury of first class. yet their faces betrayed anything but comfort. Eli rubbed his hands together nervously, eyes darting between the flight attendant and his mother. Mia kept glancing at her brothers, as if trying to shield them with her presence. Jordan, pale and tense, rested his chin on his knees, his stomach audibly growling. Each sound of hunger was another strike against Amara's patience. The flight attendant finally returned with the meal cart, her expression flat, movement sharp. Instead of beginning with the children, who were clearly waiting, she pushed past them, serving wine and entrees to other passengers first. The deliberate neglect was obvious, and a few passengers frowned, exchanging looks of disbelief. Mia, gathering courage, raised her hand politely. "Excuse me, my brother needs his meal now, please." The attendant didn't even glance at her. "I'll get to you when I can. Sit tight." Jordan's lips trembled. His condition didn't allow him to sit tight. Time mattered. Amara's chest tightened, the weight of every emergency room visit flashing in her memory. She had given the airline explicit instructions. She had double-checked, triple-confirmed, and now here they were, her child in distress, treated like an afterthought. Eli tried again, his voice small. "Ma'am, can I please have—" The attendant cut him off sharply. "Enough! I told you already. You'll get it when I decide." She slammed a tray under the cart, the clatter reverberating like a gunshot in the confined cabin. A couple of passengers jumped at the noise. Jordan flinched and whispered, "Mom, I don't feel good." That was it. Amara rose from her seat with the precision of someone who didn't need to shout to command attention. The rustle of her designer blazer and the subtle click of her heels on the cabin floor seemed louder than the engines themselves. Heads turned, conversations hushed, phones discreetly angled to capture the scene. She stood tall, her gaze fixed on the attendant. Her voice was calm, but its steel cut through the air. "You've crossed a line." The attendant blinked, feigning confusion. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Amara's tone was low, deliberate, unshaken. "My children are not nuisances for you to dismiss. One of them has a medical condition that requires precise meals at precise times. I gave this airline every instruction needed to ensure his safety, and yet here we are. Hungry children, disrespected, ignored." A ripple of whispers spread among the passengers. Someone muttered, "She's right." Another shook their head in disbelief. The attendant's mask of control faltered. "I'm just following protocol. You can't expect—" Amara stepped closer, her presence towering, her eyes like ice. "Protocol?" Her voice sharpened, each syllable cutting clean. "Protocol does not excuse negligence. Protocol does not excuse cruelty. Protocol does not humiliate children." The attendant stiffened, clutching the cart handle as though it might anchor her. Amara didn't look away, not once. Her children's wide eyes were locked on her, fear mixing with awe. She wasn't raising her voice, but the authority radiating from her silenced the entire cabin. This wasn't just a mother defending her children. This was a leader delivering judgment. "You will bring my son his meal. Now," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "And you will do it with respect, because from this moment forward, every word you say, every action you take will be documented, not just by me," she gestured subtly to the passengers, discreetly filming, "but by everyone watching." The attendant's lips parted, then closed again. Her face paled. She turned quickly, fumbling with the cart, pulling out a tray with trembling hands. Jordan's eyes widened as the meal was finally placed in front of him. He looked to his mother, uncertain, before slowly beginning to eat. Relief washed over his small face. Eli and Mia both exhaled, shoulders loosening, the fear in their eyes easing as their mother stood tall beside them. Amara didn't sit back down. Not yet. She leaned in just enough so the attendant could hear her clearly. "This isn't over," she said softly, but with lethal promise. The attendant swallowed hard, her arrogance crumbling. The rest of the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew it. Something bigger was coming. The confrontation had begun, but the reckoning had only just been set in motion. The flight attendant's hands shook as she rolled the card away. Her face flushed, her composure cracked. Around her, the hum of whispers rippled through the cabin. Some passengers looked sympathetic toward Amara and her children. Others quickly glanced down at their screens, pretending not to notice. But no one could deny the power shift that had just taken place. Amara sat back down slowly, adjusting her blazer with deliberate calm. Her eyes never left the attendant's back as the woman disappeared down the aisle. She didn't need to chase her, not yet. She had already made her point, and the tension it left in the air spoke louder than any further words could. Her children leaned in close. "Mom," Eli whispered, eyes wide. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart." Amara smoothed his hair back, her voice soft again, the sharpness melting into reassurance. "You've done nothing wrong. She was wrong. Never forget that." Mia's hand clutched her mother's. "But everyone's staring at us." "Let them stare," Amara said firmly. "When people see injustice, they need to look. Sometimes they need to feel uncomfortable. That's how change begins." Jordan, still eating his meal carefully, glanced up at her. "You sounded scary, Mommy." Amara allowed herself the smallest smile. "Good. Sometimes to protect the people you love, you have to sound scary." Her gaze flicked across the cabin. A young couple seated nearby gave her a small nod of solidarity. An older man shook his head disapprovingly, not at Amara but at the crew, and near the front, a teenage girl angled her phone, still recording, her eyes wide with admiration. The scene wasn't private anymore. It was becoming evidence. Amara leaned back, pulling her sleek leather bag closer. From inside, she quietly slid out a notepad and pen. She began to write, calmly, precisely, every word the attendant had said, every action she had taken, every moment of negligence. Her handwriting was clean and sharp, each letter a blade. "Sit down, now!" barked at children. Denied meal after 3 polite requests. Dismissed medical necessity despite prior airline notice. Humiliated minors in front of passengers. She wrote as if drafting a contract, and in many ways she was. This was a contract of accountability. Her children watched in silence, sensing the weight of her actions. Eli whispered, "Are you writing a letter?" "Something stronger," Amara murmured, her eyes still on the page. "This is the beginning of her end." Meanwhile, the flight attendant reappeared briefly, but her demeanor had changed. She avoided Amara's eyes, speaking in clipped tones to other passengers. She poured drinks too quickly, spilled a bit of water, muttered apologies. Her control was slipping. She had underestimated the woman she had tried to belittle. At the back of the cabin, 2 other attendants exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard the sharp words, seen the tension, and they knew this wasn't going to fade quietly. Amara wasn't the kind of passenger who would grumble and move on. She was the kind who turned storms into lawsuits, who transformed slights into headlines. Amara continued to write. She noted the exact time on her watch, the details of Jordan's dietary needs, the promises the airline had made. She included witness reactions, the gasps, the whispers, the phones discreetly filming. She was building a case in real time, brick by brick, and it was flawless. Mia finally asked, her voice hushed, "Mom, are you going to get her in trouble?" Amara looked at her daughter with a quiet intensity. "Sweetheart, this isn't about trouble. This is about teaching people there are consequences when they hurt others, especially children." Jordan finished the last bite of his meal and leaned back with relief. His eyelids fluttered, exhaustion already pulling at him. Amara brushed his cheek gently, her touch tender, motherly. The contrast between her warmth for them and the ice she radiated toward the crew was striking. The passengers could see it. They could feel it. She was calm, too calm. And that calmness was far more dangerous than shouting. By the time the flight landed, the attendant and her colleagues would realize Amara Johnson wasn't just another dissatisfied customer. She was a storm-gathering strength, silent and deliberate, waiting for the right moment to strike. The reckoning hadn't arrived yet, but its shadow already filled the cabin. The hum of the engines was steady, but the atmosphere in first class was anything but. A strange unease settled in the air, as though every passenger sensed they were watching something important unfold. No one spoke too loudly. No one dared to break the tension. The flight attendant returned, her face carefully arranged into a mask of neutrality. But Amara caught the flicker in her eyes, defensiveness, fear. She avoided the triplets, bypassing their row altogether as if contact with them would burn her. Passengers noticed. People always noticed. A woman across the aisle leaned toward her husband, whispering, "Did you see how she spoke to those kids?" Her husband muttered back, "Unbelievable. First class? And this is how they're treated?" The flight attendant's ears burned red. She was losing the room. Amara, meanwhile, didn't look at her. She kept writing, her pen moving steadily across the page. Her silence was more suffocating than any outburst could have been. She knew power wasn't in raised voices. It was in control. In showing your opponent that their worst mistake was assuming they had the upper hand. Eli fidgeted nervously in his seat, whispering, "Mom, everyone's staring." "They should be," Amara replied calmly, eyes still on her notes. "Let them see what happens when someone abuses authority. Let them learn." Mia leaned closer, her voice trembling. "What if she tries again?" Amara's lips curved in a cold half-smile. "She won't." At the back of the cabin, the other attendants huddled briefly, speaking in hurried tones. Their faces betrayed their unease. They had realized what their colleague hadn't. Amara Johnson was not someone to underestimate. One of them, a younger attendant with kind eyes, hesitated before walking forward. She approached Amara's row cautiously, crouching slightly so her voice wouldn't carry. "Ma'am," she began softly, "I just wanted to apologize on behalf of our crew. I understand your children's needs were ignored, and that's unacceptable." She glanced at Jordan, whose small body had relaxed now that he had eaten, then back at Amara. "If there's anything else I can do, please tell me." For the first time, Amara set down her pen. Her gaze softened slightly, though her authority didn't waver. "You're new, aren't you?" she asked. The attendant flushed. "Yes, ma'am. This is my first year." Amara studied her carefully. "Then let this be a lesson. Respect is the first duty of service. Without it, you have nothing." The young woman nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to the children, offering a small smile. "Would you three like some juice? Maybe extra blankets?" The triplets exchanged hesitant glances. Mia smiled shyly and nodded. Eli gave a small, "Yes, please." Even Jordan managed a tired but grateful nod. The young attendant hurried away, returning quickly with juice boxes, blankets, and even a small packet of cookies. She handed them out gently, her kindness standing in stark contrast to her colleague's cruelty. The passengers noticed that too. Several murmured approval. One woman even smiled warmly at the children, as if silently reassuring them. Amara let the moment breathe. Then she picked up her pen again, writing another line in her notes. One attendant showed kindness, others did not. Important distinction. The hostile attendant appeared again, her face tight with resentment. She saw the young crew member handing out juice and blankets, and her jaw clenched. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath. "Making sure the children are comfortable," the young woman replied, her voice steady though her hands shook slightly. The older attendant sneered. "You're undermining me." Amara's voice cut in like a blade. "No, she's doing her job." The hostile attendant froze, caught in Amara's gaze once again. For a moment, her lips parted as if to argue, but the weight of eyes on her, the silent recording phones, the murmurs of disapproval around the cabin, held her in check. She turned abruptly and stormed down the aisle, disappearing again. The young attendant lingered for a moment, her nervous smile flickering. "Thank you," she whispered, as though Amara's words had given her strength. Amara inclined her head slightly. "Learn well," she said. The young woman hurried away, leaving Amara and her children once more in the center of the silent storm. Her triplets snuggled under their new blankets, sipping juice. Calmer now, but Amara wasn't fooled. This was only the eye of the storm. The reckoning was still coming. She glanced down at her notes, then out the window at the endless stretch of clouds. She wasn't simply preparing a complaint. She was preparing a case, a statement, an example. The crew had no idea who they were dealing with. But they would. The seatbelt sign had switched off, but the cabin felt locked in its own invisible restraints. The air was heavy with tension, every look, every whisper orbiting around the same center. The hostile flight attendant, who had become the villain in a story no one wanted to be part of, but no one could look away from. She returned again, her heels clicking against the aisle floor like hammers driving nails. Her lips were tight, her shoulders squared, her pride unwilling to yield. This time, she didn't even attempt pretense. Her eyes went straight to Amara's row. "Those children," she said coldly, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "are disrupting first-class service. Other guests have noticed." The cabin went deathly quiet. Heads turned, eyes widened. Someone in the back stifled a gasp. Eli's hand shot to his mother's arm. "Mom!" But Amara silenced him with the gentlest touch. She rose slowly, gracefully, as though every muscle was carved from iron restraint. Her voice when it came was calm, clear, and lethal in its precision. "Which passengers?" The attendant blinked. "Excuse me?" "You said other guests have noticed." Amara's eyes swept the cabin deliberately, locking briefly with each watching face. "Point them out." The silence was absolute. Not a single passenger spoke. Many shook their heads subtly. One man even muttered, "She's lying." The flight attendant faltered. She hadn't expected this. Amara stepped forward, just enough for her presence to dominate the space. Her voice lowered, but every syllable cut sharp and undeniable. "My children were born after years of infertility treatment. One of them requires specialized care, meals every 2 hours, constant monitoring. Every mother here knows what it means to fight for a child's life. And you? You stand here in a first-class cabin, paid to serve and choose instead to humiliate them?" A ripple went through the passengers. A woman across the aisle whispered fiercely, "She's right." The hostile attendant's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Amara didn't stop. "Do you understand what I am writing?" She held up her notebook, pages already half filled. "Every detail, every word you've spoken, every witness here. When we land, this doesn't vanish. It grows. It spreads. It will be heard." Phones were raised now, 3, 4, 5 of them, recording openly. Passengers wanted it on record. The attendant's face blanched. A man in business attire spoke up, his voice firm. "I've been watching since boarding. Those kids did nothing wrong. We all saw who escalated." Another voice. "You should be ashamed." And then another. "These are children." Children. The tide had turned completely. The once silent witnesses were now an impromptu jury, their verdict unanimous. Amara sat back down, calm as if she had simply closed a book. She smoothed Mia's hair, straightened Jordan's blanket, adjusted Eli's juice box. Her message was clear. Her children's dignity came first. Always. The flight attendant, pale and trembling, retreated down the aisle. She tried to salvage control, snapping at a colleague, but it only looked pitiful now, like a shadow of authority already gone. The younger attendant returned moments later, her hands steady this time, her courage grown. She looked directly at Amara, then at the triplets. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" she asked warmly. Amara smiled faintly, her first genuine smile of the flight. "No, thank you. You've done enough." Mia whispered, "Mom, are we in trouble?" Amara turned to her children, her voice soft but resolute. "No, sweetheart. We are the reason this cabin will never forget what respect looks like." The engines droned on, the plane slicing through endless clouds. But in that first-class cabin, the storm had shifted. Amara hadn't raised her voice once, yet she had commanded the entire space. And still, deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The real reckoning would not happen midair. It would happen when wheels touched ground, when her voice carried beyond the walls of the cabin, into boardrooms, into headlines, into places where change was forced. For now, she folded her notes neatly, slid her pen back into her bag, and let silence reclaim the cabin. But to everyone present, the silence was no longer fear. It was respect. The landing gear screeched against the runway, jolting the cabin. Passengers gripped armrests, their bodies lurching forward as the plane slowed. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Local time is 6:42 p.m. Please remain seated until we have reached the gate and the seatbelt sign has been switched off." But no one was thinking about the captain's words. All thoughts were still glued to row 2A, where Amara Johnson and her triplets sat, unbothered, yet radiating an energy that had seized the entire cabin. The hostile attendant hovered near the galley, her face stiff. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, but every passenger knew she was dreading what came next. The younger attendant glanced at her nervously, whispering something about protocol, but the older woman brushed her off, lips pressed into a thin line. When the seatbelt sign finally blinked off, chaos erupted. Passengers stood, overhead bins popped open, carry-ons tugged down. Yet even in the rush, whispers kept surfacing. "She's not letting this go. Good for her. That crew's in trouble." Did you see how calm she stayed? Powerful. The triplets clung close to their mother as they prepared to disembark. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Mom, are they going to get fired?" Amara knelt down so she was level with them. Her voice was gentle, but each word carried the weight of certainty. "Sweetheart, actions have consequences. When someone disrespects you, it's not about anger. It's about justice. And justice is what we'll make sure of." Jordan, always the sensitive one, whispered, "I was scared." Amara kissed his forehead. "You don't need to be scared anymore. That's why I'm here." The aisle slowly shuffled forward. As Amara's row reached the galley, the hostile attendant stiffened. Her jaw clenched, but she forced a brittle smile. "Thank you for flying with us," she muttered. Passengers behind Amara scoffed audibly. One man shook his head and said under his breath, "Shameful." Amara paused. She didn't rush forward. She looked the attendant directly in the eye. Not with rage, not with pettiness, but with a calm authority that made the woman shift uncomfortably in her polished shoes. "I don't want your thanks," Amara said softly. "I want accountability. You'll hear from me again. Count on it." The attendant faltered, but Amara had already moved on, guiding her children down the jet bridge. As soon as they entered the terminal, Amara's phone buzzed. Her assistant had already received preliminary drafts of the written complaint, transcribed from her notes. 3 passengers who had recorded the altercation had forwarded their videos, each one capturing the humiliation, the dismissiveness, and finally the public confrontation. By the time Amara reached baggage claim, she had everything she needed: evidence, witnesses, and a platform powerful enough to make the story impossible to bury. "Mom," Mia asked quietly, holding her mother's hand, "what happens now?" Amara smiled faintly. "Now people learn what happens when you try to strip dignity from children who never asked for anything but respect." The baggage carousel spun lazily, but Amara's focus wasn't on suitcases. It was already on the next step: the meeting she would call, the statement she would issue, the way she would make sure her children's story wouldn't just vanish as another passenger anecdote. Because this wasn't about a rude flight attendant anymore. It was about a system that allowed arrogance and prejudice to flourish unchecked. And Amara Johnson had built her career dismantling systems that thought they could silence her. This was no different. The airline didn't know it yet, but their reckoning had just begun. The terminal buzzed with the usual post-flight chaos. Families regrouping, business travelers rushing toward connections, luggage carts squeaking across polished floors. Yet in the middle of the noise, Amara Johnson carried herself with an unsettling calm. Her children clustered protectively at her side. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence was louder than words. At baggage claim, she pulled out her phone. A single text to her assistant read, "Draft the complaint. Attach passenger statements and video clips. Circulate to PR in 1 hour." Her assistant's reply came back instantly. Already on it. Witnesses are volunteering statements. Amara glanced at her children. Eli fiddled with his shoelaces, still unsettled. Mia hugged Jordan, whispering that everything would be okay. Jordan, pale from exhaustion and hunger, leaned against his mother. She crouched down and smoothed his hair. 2 hours, baby, she murmured, pulling a pre-packed meal box from her carry-on. She opened it with practiced ease, feeding him while keeping her eyes sharp on the conveyor belt. We don't ever miss your schedule, not even for people who try to stand in our way. Passengers from the flight began to approach timidly, one after another. Ma'am, an older woman said, clutching her suitcase, I recorded what happened. If you need my video, it's yours. Thank you, Amara replied, her tone steady, gracious, but firm. A young man stepped forward. I work in media. People need to see this. If you want this public, I can help it spread. Not yet, Amara said. It's not about drama. It's about discipline. The airline gets the first chance to do right. If they fail, then the world will know. The hostile attendant had disappeared into the crew exit, but whispers followed her departure. Even ground staff were murmuring about the tension on board. Something unusual had happened in first class, and it was already trickling down the ranks. Amara's phone rang, the airline's ground supervisor. Miss Johnson, we've been informed there was an incident on your flight. Would you be willing to discuss? Amara's lips curved in a cold half-smile. They know already. Yes, she said evenly, but not here in baggage claim. Your office, now. Within minutes, she was escorted, children in tow, to a glass-walled operations office overlooking the terminal. The supervisor, sweating slightly under the fluorescent lights, gestured for her to sit. Amara remained standing. My children will sit, she said. I'll stand. The supervisor swallowed. We understand there was a misunderstanding with one of our flight attendants. We want to apologize. Amara cut him off with a raised hand. This was not a misunderstanding. It was deliberate humiliation of 3 children, one of whom has a documented medical condition requiring timely meals. Your staff ignored that, mocked them, and endangered my son. She slid her phone across the desk. The supervisor glanced down. The screen showed a passenger's video, clear audio, sharp visuals, every venomous word from the attendant captured. You can save your apology, Amara continued. What I want is action, written acknowledgement, disciplinary measures, and a guarantee this never happens again. The supervisor shifted uneasily. We'll need to escalate this to corporate. Do that, Amara said coolly, and understand, if I don't have a written response by morning, the recordings go public, along with the testimonies, along with my voice. And I promise you, this story will not fade quietly into the background. Behind her, Mia whispered to Eli, She sounds like she's in court. Eli nodded. She's unstoppable. Jordan, munching on his special meal, looked up and smiled faintly. She's making them listen. The supervisor stammered. Yes, ma'am. We'll escalate immediately. Amara retrieved her phone, eyes never leaving his. Good, because I'm not asking. I'm telling you how this will go. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't just a passenger complaint. This was a reckoning. And it had only just begun. By the time Amara left the ground supervisor's office, the story was already outpacing her. She hadn't said a word to the press, but in the age of smartphones, silence was never enough. Passengers had uploaded videos the moment they reached Wi-Fi. Clips of the attendant's voice cracking, "Sit down, you'll get your meals when I say so," were already bouncing around social media. Hashtags were sprouting. #Triplets Dennied. #First Class Disgrace. #Respect Our Children. Amara walked steadily through the terminal with her triplets close by, but she could feel the shift in atmosphere. A few people recognized her, whispering as she passed. Phones tilted discreetly. Her children sensed it too. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Mia asked, clutching her sleeve. Amara knelt, brushing a braid back from her daughter's face. "No, baby, we're not in trouble. They are. You did nothing wrong. You asked for what you deserved, and you were ignored. That's not on you." Eli frowned. But everyone's staring. Let them stare, Amara said calmly. One day you'll understand. Sometimes being seen is the only way to be heard. Jordan looked up, his small voice steady despite his fatigue. They'll listen now, won't they? Amara squeezed his hand. Yes, they will listen. That night in the quiet of their hotel suite, Amara dialed into a late call with her legal team. Her children were curled on the bed with cartoons playing softly, but her voice carried across the room like steel. We have grounds for negligence, her attorney said crisply. Violation of ADA protections regarding special dietary needs. Clear emotional distress. Documented misconduct. With these recordings, this case is airtight. Amara didn't flinch. Draft the suit, but first we give them the chance to make it right. I want a corporate-level response before I escalate. The lawyer hesitated. And if they stall? Then, Amara said, her eyes narrowing, we burn the house down, in the press, in the courts, and in public opinion. They want to dismiss children? Fine. Let's see how the world responds to them dismissing 3 miracles who fought to even be alive. The next morning, the airline scrambled. A bland, copy-paste email apology appeared in her inbox at dawn. It was unsigned. No accountability. No acknowledgement of Jordan's medical needs. No plan for discipline. Amara's jaw tightened. She slid the email across the breakfast table to her assistant. Unacceptable. The assistant nodded grimly. Do you want me to leak it? Not yet, Amara replied. First, we give them a chance to hang themselves properly. By noon, the first news outlets had picked it up. Black CEO's triplets humiliated in first class, one headline read. Another, airline denies meal to child with medical needs. The triplets watched the coverage, wide-eyed. Eli whispered, That's us, on TV. Mia tugged on her mom's sleeve. But what if people are mean to us? Amara turned the volume down, her voice softening. Then we remember who we are. We don't hide. We don't bow our heads. We tell the truth, and the truth will protect us. Jordan leaned into her side. You sound like when you talk to the boardroom. Amara smiled faintly. That's because this is a boardroom, baby. A bigger one. And everyone's watching. That evening, Amara held a press conference in the hotel lobby. Calm, composed, and commanding, she stood with her triplets beside her. My children were disrespected, endangered, and humiliated on a flight they had every right to enjoy. This is not about first class. This is about basic dignity. This is about respect for children, for families, for people with medical needs. And this will not be ignored. Flashes exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Amara raised her hand, silencing the room. This is no longer a private complaint. This is a demand, and the world will hear it. Behind her, the triplets stood taller, their small hands clasped. For the first time since the ordeal began, they didn't look afraid. They looked proud. The reckoning had officially begun. The boardroom in the airline's headquarters was suffocating with tension. Executives sat around the long glass table, their suits sharp, their faces tight with unease. On the large screen at the front of the room, muted news footage rolled on loop. Amara Johnson standing tall in the hotel lobby. Her 3 children beside her, her voice steady and commanding as she laid out her demands. The airline's CEO, Richard Caldwell, pinched the bridge of his nose. We have a PR nightmare. The footage has been shared over 2 million times in less than 24 hours. The hashtags are trending worldwide, and he jabbed a finger toward the screen. That woman isn't just any passenger. She's Amara Johnson. The head of PR nodded nervously. Founder and CEO of Johnson Global Solutions. Market value, $6 billion. Media reach, immense. She's a philanthropist, a keynote speaker, a name with weight. This is not going away. She has credibility, another executive muttered. People listen to her. They believe her. And she has the receipts. Caldwell slammed his palm on the table. Then why was I not informed immediately? Why am I finding out from CNN instead of my own staff? The VP of Operations stammered. We thought it could be handled locally. The ground supervisor assured us. Handled, Caldwell snapped. She has videos, witnesses, and a child with documented medical needs that were ignored. Do you want the world to think we endanger children in first class? Silence filled the room. Meanwhile, in her suite across the city, Amara was already 3 steps ahead. Her assistant spread documents across the table. Passenger statements, medical records, confirming Jordan's dietary restrictions, timelines of crew negligence. This isn't just negligence, her lawyer said firmly over speakerphone. This is systemic. They ignored a medical disclosure. That's federal liability. If you wanted to, you could own them by the end of this. Amara shook her head slowly. This isn't about ownership. It's about accountability. I want an apology that means something. I want discipline for every crew member who stood by in silence. And I want policy change, so no family ever goes through this again. Eli, sitting nearby with a sketch pad, looked up. Mom, why don't you just tell them you'll fire them? You're scarier than they are. Amara chuckled softly. Because real power, Eli, isn't about fear. It's about change. They need to know this isn't about me. It's about you, about Jordan, about every child who deserves respect. Jordan tugged at her sleeve. But are they going to say sorry? Amara kissed his forehead. They will, one way or another. Back at headquarters, the PR team scrambled. Draft statements flew back and forth. One executive suggested offering free tickets. Another floated the idea of blaming miscommunication. But Caldwell shook his head. She won't accept token gestures. We're dealing with someone who knows power and optics. If we mishandle this, it won't just cost us passengers. It'll cost us our reputation. A junior executive hesitated before speaking. Sir, what if she doesn't want an apology? What if she wants blood? Caldwell leaned back, his jaw tight. Then we give her what she wants, before she takes it herself. That evening, Amara's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unfamiliar number. She answered, her voice even. Miss Johnson, a smooth baritone said, this is Richard Caldwell, CEO of Global Air. I believe we need to speak. Amara's lips curved in a cold, deliberate smile. Yes, Mr. Caldwell, we do. The corporate storm had broken, and she was standing directly in its eye. The line crackled for a moment before Richard Caldwell's voice steadied. He sounded calm, but Amara could hear the strain behind the smoothness. Miss Johnson, let me begin by offering a personal apology. I was made aware of what happened on your flight, and I can assure you this is not reflective of our airline's values. We take these matters seriously. Amara sat at the desk in her hotel suite, the triplets playing quietly behind her. She didn't respond immediately. She let silence stretch, a tactic she'd mastered in boardrooms around the world. Silence made powerful men squirm. Caldwell cleared his throat. I'd like to personally invite you to meet with me and our executive team. We're prepared to discuss compensation and corrective actions. Finally, Amara spoke. Her voice was calm, precise, and firm. Mr. Caldwell, I don't want your sympathy. I don't want vouchers, free tickets, or scripted apologies. My children were humiliated, their health disregarded, and their dignity stripped away. That will not be resolved with a gift card and a smile. Caldwell hesitated. Of course. We're looking into disciplinary action against the staff involved. No, Amara interrupted sharply. You're not looking into it. You're doing it. By the time I speak to the press again tomorrow, I expect to announce that the individuals responsible have been held accountable, publicly, transparently. And beyond that, I want to know what you're going to change in your training and policy so that no child with medical needs is ever placed in this position again. Behind her, Eli whispered to Mia. She's in CEO mode. Mia nodded, wide-eyed. Caldwell tried to regain his footing. We can certainly review our policies. These things take time. Time? Amara's tone sharpened. My son's health didn't have time. He could have been harmed because your crew dismissed his needs. I disclosed his dietary requirements. I confirmed them before boarding. And still, your flight attendant decided her convenience mattered more than his safety. Do you understand the liability you're facing here? There was silence on the other end. Amara pressed on. Mr. Caldwell, I've spent my career building businesses, navigating crises, and negotiating with people who thought they could outmaneuver me. Let me be very clear. I am not a woman you dismiss, and I am not a mother you underestimate. You will not gaslight me with polite excuses. You will fix this, or I will. Caldwell's voice dropped lower. What exactly are you asking for? Amara leaned back, eyes narrowing. Here's what I want. H1, a written public apology addressed to my children, not to me, to them. 2, termination or suspension of the staff involved, including those who stood by in silence. Complicity is not acceptable. 3, a revised policy on medical accommodations with proof of implementation. 4, a seat at the table when those policies are crafted. If you can't protect children on your flights, then you'll have to listen to someone who can. Her words were deliberate, each one landing like a hammer. Caldwell exhaled slowly. That's a lot. Amara's eyes glinted. It's the bare minimum. The silence that followed was heavy, but Amara didn't flinch. Behind her, Jordan tugged on her sleeve. Mom, did they say sorry yet? She turned and brushed his cheek with her hand. Not yet, baby, but they will. Caldwell finally spoke again, his tone more subdued. Miss Johnson, I'll need to speak to my team, but I understand the seriousness. Let's reconvene tomorrow morning. You'll have my word by then. Amara's voice was cool as ice. You don't have until tomorrow morning. You have until tonight. If you fail, the recordings go public at dawn. And when that happens, Mr. Caldwell, you won't just have a PR nightmare. You'll have a brand in freefall. She ended the call without waiting for his reply. Her children looked at her, eyes wide. Mia whispered, You sounded like you were winning. Amara smiled faintly. I'm not here to win, sweetheart. I'm here to make sure you're never treated like that again. And for that, I'll fight as long as it takes. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like sparks. A battle line had been drawn, and Amara had no intention of retreating. The conference room at Global Sky's headquarters buzzed with nervous energy. It was nearly midnight, yet no one dared leave. Executives hunched over laptops, analysts whispered in corners, and legal counsel tapped furiously on their tablets. On the big screen, social media feeds scrolled in real time. Hashtags climbing, news outlets picking up the story. Public anger surging like wildfire. Hash Flight 341. Hash Justice for the Triplets. Hash Global Ski Scandal. Every minute, another influencer chimed in. Another video reposted. Another passenger's account surfaced. The narrative was no longer a disagreement on a flight. It was a cultural flashpoint. Richard Caldwell stood at the head of the table, jaw tight. His crisp white shirt sleeves were rolled up, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. We are at a breaking point. If we mishandle this by morning, our stock will bleed. Our credibility is already halfway gone. We need a decision, now. One VP, sweating under the fluorescent lights, leaned forward. Sir, firing the staff outright could look like admitting fault. That opens us to litigation. Litigation? Caldwell snapped, slamming his fist onto the table. We're already facing litigation. What Amara Johnson is threatening is worse than any lawsuit. She's threatening annihilation of our public trust. If that video trends any higher, we're not talking about settlements. We're talking collapse. Across the table, the head of PR adjusted her glasses. Mr. Caldwell, she's not just another angry passenger. She's Amara Johnson. People are already digging. She's being hailed online as a powerhouse CEO, a mother of triplets, a symbol of resilience. If we fight her, we look like the villain. If we ignore her, we look heartless. Our only option is to give her everything, muttered one of the younger strategists, voice low but cutting through the noise. The room went still. Caldwell's eyes flicked toward him. The strategist cleared his throat. She doesn't want money. She doesn't want upgrades. She wants change. If we frame it right, this could be spun as leadership, not defeat. Announce sweeping reforms. Show her at the table. Use her credibility to restore ours. Murmurs erupted. Some executives scoffed, others nodded. That would mean admitting she's right, grumbled legal. She is right, PR countered. The world has already decided that. Our only chance is to stand beside her before she leaves us behind. Caldwell rubbed his temples. He could feel the walls closing in. His empire, his airline, slipping through his fingers because one flight attendant couldn't control her temper. Meanwhile, across the city, Amara sat in her suite, reviewing her notes. The triplets were asleep at last, their small bodies curled together like puzzle pieces. She looked at them, chest tightening with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. She remembered the years of infertility treatments, the heartbreak of failed attempts, the miracle phone call that had finally changed her life. She remembered holding 3 fragile infants in the NICU, swearing she'd never let the world crush them. And tonight was a continuation of that promise. Her phone buzzed, a message from her assistant. 3 networks confirmed for morning interviews. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, all waiting for your statement. Amara exhaled slowly. She wasn't just fighting for her children anymore. She was carrying every parent who had ever been dismissed, every child who had ever been overlooked. At headquarters, the debate dragged on. Caldwell finally raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. By dawn, we will have a statement drafted. We will concede to her demands, partially. We cannot hand her the keys to the airline, but we can position this as collaborative reform. Get her back on a call, offer transparency, offer partnership. But make no mistake, she is not running Global Skies. I am. The room nodded, though unease lingered, because deep down they all sensed the truth. Amara wasn't just forcing them to react. She was reshaping the battlefield. And by morning, the world would know who truly held the power. Morning sunlight cut across the skyline as camera crews swarmed outside Amara Johnson's hotel. Vans from CNN, BBC, and local affiliates lined the curb, their reporters rehearsing live intros. The scandal had exploded overnight. By dawn, it wasn't just a trending story, it was the story. Inside her suite, Amara stood before a mirror while her assistant adjusted the lapel of her navy blazer. Her triplets sat at the table eating breakfast, Mia nibbling toast, Eli scrolling through a tablet, Jordan clutching his special meal pack. They were calm, as if unaware that their family was now the center of an international storm. Amara's phone buzzed again. Another notification. Stock analysts predicting turbulence for Global Skies. A headline blared across the screen. Black CEO confronts airline over child endangerment, demands reform. Her assistant glanced at her. You ready? Amara met her own eyes in the mirror, steady and unflinching. I've been ready since they told my child no. Minutes later, she stepped into the hotel lobby. The crowd erupted. Flashes, microphones, shouted questions all at once. But Amara didn't flinch. She walked with quiet authority, her triplets just behind her, every lens capturing the image of a mother, leading with power. A CNN reporter called out, Miss Johnson, do you plan to sue the airline? She paused at the podium they had set up in the lobby. The cameras snapped into focus. This is not about money, she said, her voice ringing clear. This is about accountability. My children were denied their rights, their safety, and their dignity, rights every passenger is entitled to. This isn't the first time families have been disrespected, but it will be the last. I am here to demand systemic reform, not just for us, but for everyone who steps onto a plane. The crowd erupted in applause. Even some journalists lowered their cameras for a moment, caught in the weight of her words. Across the city in the airline's headquarters, Richard Caldwell watched the broadcast on a wall of screens. His face was pale, his jaw rigid. Every sentence Amara spoke cut deeper than any press release his team could draft. Sir, his PR chief whispered, if we don't act now, we're finished. Caldwell clenched his fists. Get her on the phone, Liv, before she locks us out completely. Back in the lobby, Amara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the caller ID, then answered on speaker for the crowd to hear. Miss Johnson, this is Richard Caldwell, the voice boomed, laced with forced calm. On behalf of Global Skies, I want to extend our deepest apologies to you and your family. We take full responsibility. Amara's eyes flicked to the cameras. Perfect timing. Mr. Caldwell, she replied, her tone sharp but measured, your apology means nothing unless it's backed by action. Families don't need sympathy, they need safety. Passengers don't need words, they need policy. So I'll ask you plainly, what exactly are you prepared to change? The reporters leaned in, breathless. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a live negotiation playing out in front of millions. Caldwell hesitated, aware every word was binding. Finally, he said, we will launch a full investigation. The crew members in question will be terminated, and effective immediately, we will implement a passenger dignity initiative, including mandatory training for all staff. Amara didn't blink. That's a start, but it's not enough. You ignored medical disclosures. That puts lives at risk. I want a federal compliance audit, published results, and a permanent advisory board with passenger representation. Not hidden reports. Transparency. The lobby roared with approval. Cameras zoomed closer. Hashtags exploded again. Caldwell's silence stretched on the line. He was cornered, every eye watching. Finally, through gritted teeth, he said, agreed. Amara lowered the phone, her expression calm but resolute. This isn't just my victory, she told the crowd. This is for every parent, every passenger, every voice that's ever been silenced at 30,000 feet. Today, the world remembers. Dignity flies first class. The applause was thunderous. By evening, the story had swallowed the globe. News tickers scrolled across every major network. Airline scandal. Mother forces CEO to commit to passenger reforms. Global skies. Stock plummets as #dignity flies first trends worldwide. In New York, trading floors buzz with panic. Investors dump shares of Global Skies at record speed. Analysts predicted the airline's market value could sink by billions in days. Commentators on CNBC marveled, one woman, 3 kids, and the entire airline industry is shaking. Meanwhile, in living rooms across the U.S., families replayed the viral clip of Amara standing firm, her triplets behind her. Parents saw themselves in her defiance. Children whispered, that's the mom who stood up for her kids. Across the ocean, European regulators called emergency meetings. The EU Aviation Commissioner issued a statement. The treatment of Miss Johnson and her children raises urgent questions about industry-wide standards. We will examine whether current protections for vulnerable passengers are adequate. In Nairobi, Johannesburg, London, Toronto, social media exploded with solidarity. Hashtags trended in multiple languages. Memes flooded timelines. Side-by-side images of the arrogant flight attendant versus Amara's poised stance at the podium. Captions read, this is what power looks like. Even celebrities joined in. A-list actors, athletes, and musicians posted messages. Respect to this queen. She spoke for all of us. Airlines better pay attention. Moms are not to be underestimated. This isn't a scandal. It's a revolution. And in classrooms, teachers showed clips to students, sparking debates about dignity, racism, and authority. Kids scribbled notes about courage, family, and justice. Amara Johnson was no longer just a CEO or a mother. She was a movement. But not everyone applauded. Inside Global Sky's headquarters, a war room of lawyers and executives scrambled to contain the fallout. Caldwell slammed his fist on the table. We gave her what she wanted. Why isn't this ending? His PR chief's voice trembled. Because she's not just asking for reforms. She's rewriting the conversation. People don't see her as a customer. They see her as a leader. Across the city, Amara sat quietly in her hotel room, the triplets asleep on the bed behind her. She scrolled through messages, hundreds pouring in every hour. Some were from grateful parents, some from airline staff confessing they had witnessed or endured similar abuses, and some from government officials asking her to testify at hearings. Her assistant entered softly. You've been invited to Washington. The Senate Committee on Aviation wants you to speak. Amara exhaled slowly. The fight had gone beyond her family now. It was bigger than Jordan's medical meals, bigger than Eli's trembling questions, bigger than Mia's frightened whispers. This was about systemic change. She glanced at her children, their faces peaceful in sleep. For you, she thought, always for you. Meanwhile, in airports worldwide, passengers grew bolder. Mothers demanded accommodations without hesitation. Fathers raised their voices when treated unfairly. Travelers recorded every slight, posting under the banner of #dignity flies first. Airline competitors smelled blood in the water. One rival released a sleek ad within 24 hours. At Skyreach, every passenger matters. Families fly safe with us. The ad went viral, further deepening Global Sky's humiliation. Late that night, Amara appeared on a primetime interview. The host leaned forward, visibly in awe. "You're being called the Rosa Parks of aviation. How does that sit with you?" Amara shook her head gently. "This isn't about me. It's about respect. Every human being deserves dignity. If my children were treated this way in first class, imagine what's happening in coach. This isn't one story. It's millions." The host nodded slowly. "So what's next?" Amara's eyes glimmered, her tone calm yet unshakable. "Next, we take this beyond one airline. This is about an entire industry, and I won't stop until change is permanent." Across the world, millions watched, transfixed. Some cheered, some wept, but all understood one thing: the reckoning had just begun. 2 weeks later, the polished mahogany doors of the U.S. Senate Committee on Aviation swung open. The room buzzed with cameras, reporters, and lawmakers. At the center sat Amara Johnson, poised, unshaken, her triplets watching from the gallery with wide, proud eyes. The chairperson cleared his throat. "We are here to address systemic issues in airline accountability. Ms. Johnson, thank you for agreeing to testify." Amara adjusted the microphone, her calm voice carrying across the chamber. "Thank you, senators. I am not here today as a CEO. I am not here as a frequent flyer. I am here as a mother." The room stilled. Even the reporters stopped tapping their keyboards. She continued, "2 weeks ago, my children were humiliated on a flight we paid for, not because of protocol, not because of policy, but because of arrogance. A flight attendant decided that my children's needs didn't matter. She mocked their medical requirements. She yelled at them. She stripped them of dignity. And the airline protected her until public outrage forced their hand." Senator Ruiz leaned forward. "Mrs. Johnson, are you saying this is not an isolated case?" Amara's eyes narrowed. "It is not. Since that day, I've received thousands of messages. Families denied boarding because of wheelchairs. Parents shouted at because their toddlers cried. Elderly passengers ignored when they needed help. This is not about one flight. It is about a culture of neglect." Mia, Eli, and Jordan watched, their small faces glowing with pride. For them, this wasn't just their mother. It was a force of nature. Senator Hawkins, skeptical, asked, "And what would you propose, Miss Johnson? More rules? More fines?" Amara leaned in, unblinking. "I propose accountability, mandatory training for all staff in empathy and inclusion, transparent channels for passenger complaints, penalties for airlines that neglect medical requirements, and, most importantly, a passenger bill of rights that ensures dignity is not optional but guaranteed." The chamber murmured. Some nodded, some frowned, but none could deny her authority. From the gallery, the triplets squeezed each other's hands. Jordan whispered, "She's winning." Meanwhile, television networks broadcasted live. Millions tuned in. On social media, hashtags surged again. #Amara speaks, #dignity flies. First, #passengers, united. Memes, sound bites, and GIFs flooded timelines. In coffee shops, homes, and classrooms, people stopped what they were doing just to hear her words. A senator asked, "Miss Johnson, some say you're seeking publicity, that this is less about justice and more about power." Amara didn't flinch. "Power?" She smiled faintly. "Let me tell you what power is. Power is when a flight attendant thinks she can scream at an 8-year-old child and no one will stop her. Power is when an airline hides behind protocols to excuse cruelty. That is power. What I am doing here is balance." The room erupted with applause from the gallery. Even some senators couldn't hide their approval. Reporters scribbled furiously. Headlines were already forming. Amara Johnson demands passenger Bill of Rights. Mother turns pain into policy. After hours of testimony, the chairperson finally concluded, "Thank you, Miss Johnson. Your words will weigh heavily on our decisions." Amara stood, gathering her papers, but before leaving, she glanced at her children. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, the weight of everything they had endured transformed into triumph. As they walked out, cameras flashed, microphones stretched forward. "Mrs. Johnson, do you think change is coming?" The Senate hearing was only the beginning. Weeks passed, but the momentum never slowed. Legislators across the U.S. drafted proposals inspired directly by Amara's testimony, a passenger Bill of Rights. For the first time in history, laws were being written not just about safety and efficiency, but about respect, empathy, and dignity. Airlines scrambled to adapt. Some launched crash course training programs for crew members. Others unveiled new family assistance teams designed to ensure children, elderly, and disabled passengers were cared for. Not all changes were perfect, but the shift was undeniable. And everywhere, people knew the reason why. Amara Johnson, her name became shorthand for accountability. News outlets referred to the Johnson effect whenever a company was forced to rethink how it treated its customers. Professors cited her case in business ethics courses. Children studied her story in classrooms under themes of justice and courage. But in the Johnson household, things felt quieter, more ordinary. One crisp morning, Eli, Mia, and Jordan sat at the kitchen table, munching on cereal as sunlight spilled through the window. The TV hummed softly in the background, announcing another airline that had overhauled its training. "Mom," Eli said between bites, "you're on TV again." Amara looked up from her laptop, smiling. "I'd rather be on breakfast duty." Mia giggled. "You're famous." Jordan, more serious, put down his spoon. "You didn't just help us, did you? You helped everyone." Amara's eyes softened. "I helped because of you. The world just happened to be watching." They smiled, a shared understanding passing between them. Later that day, Amara walked through the lobby of her company headquarters. Employees rose when they saw her, not just out of respect for her title, but because of what she represented. For them, she wasn't just their CEO. She was proof that power could be used not to dominate, but to protect. Reporters still followed her, still asked for interviews. But Amara had grown more selective. She didn't chase headlines anymore. She chose platforms that amplified the message, not the spectacle. One evening, she sat in her study, sorting through a mountain of letters. Some were from strangers, parents who said her courage gave them strength, children who drew pictures of planes with the words, "Dignity flies first," scribbled in crayons, airline employees who admitted her fight had forced companies to listen to complaints long ignored. Amara placed the letters carefully in a wooden box. One day she knew her triplets would read them and understand the ripple effect of their story. But change was not without resistance. A handful of airline executives fought bitterly, lobbying to water down reforms. Pundits on certain networks accused Amara of exaggerating or seeking fame. But each time they tried to discredit her, the public pushed back harder. The viral video, the testimony, the movement, it was all documented. Truth was on her side and the people knew it. In time, the law passed. The Passenger Bill of Rights became a reality, setting a new global precedent. Airlines worldwide adjusted, fearing backlash if they failed to adapt. The very culture of air travel shifted, not instantly, not perfectly, but permanently. On the one-year anniversary of that fateful flight, Amara and her triplets returned to the airport. Cameras spotted them, of course, but this time there was no scandal. Airline staff greeted them with respect. Fellow passengers whispered, some even clapped. The triplets walked proudly beside their mother, no longer nervous, no longer afraid. Before boarding, Jordan tugged her sleeve. "Mom, do you think it's really over?" Amara knelt down, brushing his hair back. "It's never over, baby. But what we did means no kid will have to fight the same fight you did, and that's what matters." As the family boarded, A flight attendant smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard, Johnson family." "It's an honor." The triplets grinned, and for the first time in a long time, the flight felt like what it was supposed to be: safe, respectful, human. In living rooms across the globe, people remembered the image of Amara standing tall, her triplets at her side. That moment had transcended a single airline or a single family. It had become a universal symbol: the dignity of every passenger, the strength of every parent, the unshakable truth that respect is not optional. Amara Johnson hadn't set out to become a global figure. She had only wanted her children to be treated with kindness. But in defending them, she had defended everyone. And so her legacy was not written in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the hearts of ordinary people who now walked taller, demanded more, and refused to be silenced. Her story had begun on a plane, but its echoes would be felt wherever justice, dignity, and courage were needed. Because one mother, 3 miracles, and 1 flight had changed the world. The world decided otherwise. The crowd erupted, chants echoing through the Capitol steps. Dignity, dignity, dignity. And just like that, Amara Johnson was no longer only the mother who defended her triplets. She was the face of a movement, a leader who had taken one act of injustice and turned it into a revolution that could no longer be ignored.